Good afternoon, team. Um, Continue on with our training series. This one is probably one of my favorite. We'll talk about PGx, pharmacogenetic testing. I want to start off like all the rest of them. If you have not, and this is a lot of material to learn. If you haven't spent some pretty considerable time studying about PGx, you need to go back and do that before you even start to watch this video, or you'll be lost as a babe in the woods. So, again, I know every video starts off this way, but I just want to make sure nobody wastes their time going through this to be totally lost and have to go back. So this is your livelihood. Know this material inside out. Then come with the video. We'll put it together to teach you how to use it, and then we can do fine-tune training and more advanced stuff later. But I want to get everybody well-versed where they can educationally speak to a provider about this, because this could be life-changing for a lot of folks, and a life-saving for a lot of folks. So without further ado, let's jump in. A lot of times people kind of, they make comments about, how passionate I seem about things like this. Well, it is. I've been studying genetic testing for decades. I got started looking into it when my youngest daughter was born. She's got a little genetic thing. It's like a mild form of albinism, and that got us. We had to go talk to genetic counselors, and then from there, it intrigued me, and I started doing homework and reading articles, and so I followed it all of my daughter's life. So, so there's some passion here for that, but even without that, you need to become this passionate about what we can do to literally save so many people's lives and protect so many people out here that the medicine is killing them and messing their lives up, and we can stop it with a cheap test. It's amazing. In fact, let me pull something up while we're talking, and I'll look at some numbers here in a second. But with the PGx, what we're trying to do is to find out one of 4 categories that a client falls into. We'll get into those in a second, but the pharmacogenetics, the PGx you hear it called, it's basically to figure out the genetic makeup and how to respond to drugs. And we'll get into that. Oh, come on. There we go. So, and I don't see a lot of acronyms in this kind of business, but here's one where select, avoid, and maximize. The goals of pharmacogenetics. And say this word until it rolls off your tongue intelligently. Pharmacogenetics. And there's a term, pharmacogenomics and pharmacogenetics, which are used interchangeably. They have a little bit, but they're basically the same thing. So the goal is to select responsive patients to avoid drug reactions, and we're going to talk a lot about ADR for the next few minutes. ADR, adverse drug reactions. So learn that terminology. That needs to be like the or to everybody else. That needs to be ADRs and PGx needs to be on your tongue. And then maximize the drug efficacy of how it's done. Now, when do you do genetic testing? Well, pretty simple. Prior to initiating therapy on a drug that's hard to dose, or after you've already initiated a therapy on a drug, or particularly somebody's not achieving the expected therapeutic goal. Now, you see when you see the brochure side by side, when it's opened up like a book, you'll see these 2 pages here together. you got 4 categories that everybody's going to fall into. And here's the whole thing with PGx in a nutshell. It's all about how you metabolize a drug. When you ingest a medication in your body, you metabolize it so it does its job, and then it's excreted. Now, how you metabolize determines whether or not you should take it and how much and how often. So let's look at rapid here. Rapid metabolizer. You can have unexpected responses, and typically they don't work. Have you ever been prescribed a medication, you took it, nothing? I didn't get better, or didn't get worse, and nothing. More likely than not, you have suffered an adverse drug reaction, and you are a rapid metabolizer, so you took a drug, you didn't get the result because your body burned it up so fast, it didn't have a chance to become therapeutic. You're a rapid metabolizer. A case like that, a doctor would have to prescribe a higher or more frequent dose to get the desired effect that they're after. Now, the other one is normal. You take the drug, it does its job, you live life, you go on, you're happy, so you're normal. And you need, and if it comes back normal, then you need to know that. The 3 problems are the rapid, then you have intermediate and poor. Intermediate, there's minimal effect. And what would happen here is, you take a medicine and I'm going to try to talk from life here, not just from a manual. You're taking a drug, and it might be curing the infection, or it might be fixing this little problem, but you just feel awful. Typically, you're probably an intermediate metabolizer, or maybe even poor, and you're suffering side effects from that medication because your body isn't metabolizing it, and the dose they've got you on, there's too much of it, and you're basically overdosing. Not intentional, it's just an unintentional overdose based on standard dosing protocols because you're not standard. You fit into a different category. Then you have the poor or no metabolizer. This is where it's dangerous because there are very benign drugs out there that you could give to one person and it does its job and they live life and go on, and the person beside them take that same drug and 2 weeks later they're dead from an adverse drug reaction. Matter of fact, at the top of this page right here, look here, it says consequences of mismanagement. Now you got to remember, this was 2015 was the last real data that they've got on here. They might be a new one out from then, but I don't think it's changed much. Adverse drug reactions. There's over 2 million reactions a year. All right, let me put that in perspective. How does an adverse drug reaction get recorded to the FDA? You have to go through a process. It's reported to a physician or provider. They report to the FDA. They have a team that follows up, and they question you, and they go into this, and then they question the physician. They go off, and there's a stack of paper that thick that gets filled out by this team before that's reported back to the FDA as a true adverse drug reaction. How many times have you taken a drug and didn't feel good, or it didn't do its job, or maybe you're sick and you stopped taking it? Did you go through that process and report all that and go through that trouble to report that to the FDA? Probably not. So if 2 million of them got reported, 2 million, how many do you think actually occurred? That's why when we're talking about that kind of volume, that's what I'm telling you about, what we've got in our hands to be able to fix. It's the 4th leading cause. Now again, these are old numbers, but 4th leading cause of death in the United States is prescription medicines that just killed the patient. 5th leading cause of illness. And the cost of mortality in 2015 was $177 billion in mortality costs from adverse drug reactions, reported adverse drug reactions. So now you understand how important what this is and what we're offering, what it does, and how it protects people, not only saving their lives, but improving the quality of lives and getting them the treatment that they need from the medication that they're taking. You have, right now, there's two primary categories that we're going to be targeting. And those are ones that insurance and CMS is more likely to cover without any problems or aggravation to get it paid for. Now, it shows here, there's going to be a couple. I'm going to talk about them, but it starts off here, the pain management. Pain management is one of those categories because what a lot of folks do when they take a medication, the way everything works, it's like me. I can take one narcotic pill and I will be completely obliterated for 24 to 36 hours before I even open my eyes. And there's people I know right now that have a patch on their arm that contains enough fentanyl to stop me from breathing. They wear that patch 24 hours a day. So now you see how people metabolize medications differently. That's why it's critical that they get it right the first time. Pain management can be one of those areas. Neuroactive drugs well, I don't want to get too deep in the woods here on this one here, but the CYP, we're going to talk about some different teams in just a second. This category right here, well, back up. The neuroactive drugs are more of your, I call them psychotropics, and I don't think that's the right term, but basically you got a lot of folks, particularly children, that are taking drugs for ADD, ADHD, anxiety, depression, some of your bipolar, schizophrenic type, different drugs that affect your neuro uptake sites and things like that. Those are ones that are very highly potentially fatal, if not exactly moderated the way it should be. So this is one of the critical areas. The next most critical area, actually higher than that, are your blood thinners. The anticoagulants are highly fatal because of what happens if you got somebody that's a ultra metabolizer. You give them the medicine, they burn the medicine up, and then left, and they clot, they have a stroke and die, or get disabled. Same thing, if you got somebody that's a slow metabolizer, and you give them this, and then next thing you know, they find them in their bed dead with a pool of blood because the medicine built up in their system and poisoned and killed them. And these are some really highly sensitive areas. Your Plavix, your warfarins. There's 2 or 3 new ones out now, and they're coming out all the time. So those are critical that they get the numbers correct. Now, I'm going to run through a couple things that you would normally see. Blow this up where you can read it. This is a copy of a sample test. Shows the patient, their current meds are taking Plavix, which is one of them, anticoagulants, and low pressure, which is a beta blocker. So Plavix is a red flag. Significantly reduced response, evidence level 2. Consider alternative therapy. Give them different drugs. These are some different ones here. Man, I hadn't seen dipyridamole in years. But anyway, but what it does is these flags, it gives the physician a red flag that says, hey, you might want to think about this. It's still up to the provider to do what they want. I mean, this is just guidelines. But the CYP is the main category in this one, and this one here, the CYP, the 2C19, and then the 2C9 genomes here, it shows that they're poor metabolizer. So it's saying this drug is going to build up and kill them. Don't give it to them. Look at something else. Don't you think a provider would love to have that information when they're prescribing these medications to people? You realize most successful lawsuits from a provider practice is from ADRs. And when you can go in and so listen, I can show you how you can order a test and protect yourself from these ADRs lawsuits because you've done everything you can do to make sure that you've either gave them the right drug or gave them the right dose of the drug they needed because you're following evidence-based medicine to show this. Now, the beta blocker with the green check, everything's fine. Normal sensitivity, you can give it a standard label dose. And then selection requires individual titration. So this one's great. This one's good. Scroll down. Now here's warfarin. Remember I told you about the different ones? It's intermediate. It says they may require a decrease in warfarin dosage, increased thrombosis risk. They're factor 5. We talked about the in other videos, the clotting factors here. It's showing an increased thrombosis risk with those if you use some of these different things here. It says here, no family history on the thing here. Another red flag. The apolipoprotein E, increased risk of hyperlipidemia and atherosclerotic heart disease or vascular disease. They have one copy of an abnormal APOE. Remember I told you earlier, that's going to be a common one you hear a lot about. APOE is the one that causes this clot problems from the lipids. And that's associated with a higher risk of cardiovascular disease. Now, it goes in farther, it even gives them potentially impacted medications. Now, I've been a paramedic for 39 years. I still practice part-time volunteer just to keep my skills up. But on a daily basis, if I'm working, I walk into a house. You ready to go? Yeah, give them up. Where's your medicine? And with my hand up, they walk into the room with a grocery bag or bags full of medications. They're like, I don't know what's wrong. I look at them, I say, I see exactly what's wrong right now. You hold them in your hand. Because what happens is especially if they've got 4 doctors or 5 doctors that they go to. They'll go to this doctor and he'll write them a prescription. Well, they'll be so sick, they'll go to another doctor and he'll write them a prescription for that side effect they're having from this other medicine. Well, them two together cause another problem. And they go to this other doctor for this particular symptom, and he writes them a prescription that fits that interacts with the other 3 that they're taking. The next thing you know, they got 2 grocery bags full of medicine, and they're all fighting with each other that shouldn't be taken together, and they're sick as a dog because of they're going to a doctor. And the doctor didn't have the knowledge here. So that's what this is for, and it tells you right here. Potentially medications, all right, cardiovascular, CV meds. Consider alternatives. Say just stay away from Plavix. If you're going to give them Lescal or Coumadin, be careful with it. Remember the earlier page. And then listen, you can give them all you want to these because they're going to do this one just fine. Same thing, pain meds. These medicines here, if you're going to give them these, better watch it. They got the alleles that they interact with it, and there's no red flags here. So there's nothing they cannot take. It's just you're going to give these. Be careful. Might want to stay in this category. Psychotropics. Hey, verify what I've said. No red flags. Quite a few cautions. Look like all your amitriptylines and stuff like that you got to watch out for. The certain ones, but you got some over here that's not. I look at this long list but these are okay to take over here, like amitriptyline, which has been around for, Lord knows, at least 40 years or matter, 50 maybe. But nortriptyline they can take. There's another triptyline. Anyway, there's others that they can take. They just say if you're going to give these, be careful. Bang has been around a long time. Celex has been around a long time. Lexapro, the Lord, that's older than I am. Dilantin for seizures. Been around forever. So if you got somebody take seizures, they got to be careful with this one because it could kill them, it could cause problems. So they'll be looking over here at some of these other things. But you see all these different Risperidals, the Haldols, the Aricept, that's for Alzheimer's. Your Strattera, which is your ADHD kind of drug. So it gives you that list down. Same thing here, other medications. These are some different things like blood sugar type medicines. Use with caution, no red flags here. But over here, saying, use these. The Nexiums, Prevacid, Prilosec, Zofran, Protonix, all the Flomax. These are drugs that they can take with no problem. And it goes on and on. But now those drugs that were showing up in that category, it comes over here, it tells you why. So the physician, it don't just, a physician would get perturbed, if somebody sends him a report saying, I think you should give this drug instead of that one, because he's going to bow up and say, hey, wait a minute. I've been writing these daggone prescriptions long, and you've been alive, boy. Don't you get in my face and tell me how to give that medication. But when you got a report like this that says, stay away from Celebrex because start at the lowest dose, but be alert to GI events. Consider something else if you're trying to treat juvenile RA. Do something else. This is evidence-based medicine, and this level 1, level 2 here is top tier. So this is not just some knee-jerk reaction to something. So that's why this is important. One page here, you talk about your legals, your APOE, your factor 5s, all these different things. It gives you what the risk is. And this is the card that this here is a card that the patient gets to carry with them. So if they're hurt, sick, go to the emergency room, they've got this thing right here, and it's telling them what types of medications to not get till they're increased risk of thrombosis, or don't give them more for they're coming in and having a stroke. You want to be careful what you give them. So that's the back on the scientific end of things. A few other things to wrap up here. First of all, results. It helps predict the patient's response. It manages and avoids these ADRs. Gives you better treatment results. They call this, the PGx is the pharmacogenetics, but it's called personalized medicine. And patients eat that up because they're not just some number on a prescription pad, that some doctor scribbled off and handed to them. Personalized medicine. It's designed for the outcomes to avoid those reactions and make sure that if you do take a medicine, because think about it. We talked about earlier about patients not being able to afford these tests and having to write it off. Well, how many times have you been prescribed the medication, and even if you had insurance, the copay was like $140, and on the third tablet, you took them, and you're like, I'm not doing this. I can't have this. Is making me sick as a dog. Well, I hate to break the news to you, but you don't go back to this is not Walmart. You don't go hand them the pill bottle back and say, hey, these things made me sick. I want my money back. Don't work that way. You're out $140, and now whatever the new prescription is going to cost, if you write you another one costs $120, now you're back to the drugstore with another $120 experiment. And without this test, every one of them is an experiment. So, but you eliminate all that with this test. It's convenient. It's again a cheap swab, or they can do it with a blood draw. We'll talk more about collectors and things like that. We'll put phlebotomists in the office as long as there's enough activity there to justify the cost of it. The doctor gets a web result on all our tests. They give him a secure login. When the test is done, he'll get an email that says you have a test result ready. He logs in, he looks at it, and then he can either print it and scan it. Most EMR, we can download. You can download it right straight into their EMR. And some of them, if they're still on paper charts, they can just print it, stick it in the file. We don't care. We'll provide it to them in whatever method and things that they want, and we'll make it happen. But again, all these different reports would be part of the record at that point in time. And that's pretty much, and this is reimbursable by Medicare. What I talked about earlier, PGx. If you do the full comprehensive panel, bill is thousands of dollars, but Medicare and most private insurance pays anywhere from $1,100 to $3,000. So that's paid by the insurance. And if a patient can't pay for that, they'll work out a deal. I think the actual physical cost on that one, well, the cash price that they'll do it for is about $300. If there's no insurance involved and they just need some help, they'll start there. If they can't pay it, they'll just do it and write it off, because again, the next patient that has insurance will pay full price and it washes out down the road. So don't ever let cost become an issue. There's no real medical legitimate objections that I see from this test. The only objection you're going to get to offering this test, for providers to offer it to their patients, is the cost, like I talked about earlier, that we deal with, where no other lab will do this. If you order it, they need it, we do it. If they can't pay for it, we write it off. We'll try to get them to pay something on it. I mean, $10, $20, $100, whatever they can do. And if they can't do anything, we'll send them 3 bills and write the thing off and be done with it. Nobody else does that. Nobody else has never gone to court and won't go to court with their clients and patients. But that's the one objection. If the doctor or provider even cares, most of them don't think twice about it. If they did, why would they write you, if you're diabetic, why would they write you a $300 copay medication when a $5 glucose most likely going to do the same thing? Because the last drug rep in there said this drug is the cat's be out and you've got to prescribe it. He prescribes it with total disregard for it, or don't know and don't care what it costs. If you go back and question them on it, then they start getting involved, then they get care. But a lot of them do. They understand that, and they try to, that's part of their care to their patient, is to try to look after their costs. That's the ones that's going to bring this up. And it's a fair question, and it's great that they care enough about their people to do that when most of them won't. And thank them for that. And instead of taking an injection and taking tag and run, thank them. Say, you realize how few providers care enough about their patients to even consider the cost of this medication? You know what we've done for that? Go into what I just told you. Now, what is the doctor going to say when you get done with that? Darn, that's pretty good. And then the other objection that you may run into here, especially from the older crowd, is, boy, and it's always funny. It's either, sometimes depending on where you're at in the country, they may use different terminology. Down here in the South, they're like, boy, I've been writing prescriptions longer than you've been alive. And I'm 50-something years old. He's like, well, I need to run a test to write a prescription. I'm like, don't say this out loud. The first thing in your mind is like, where have you been for the last 15 minutes? I've been telling you why you want to do it this way. But then you just take them right back to the patient gets better care because they get the medicine right the first time without guessing, because you don't know what their genetic makeup is. They get the right medication, they get the right dose, they save money, they get it at the right price. You're protected from adverse drug reaction lawsuit. They're protected from disability or loss of life from ADRs. Your practice is protected. I mean, tell me who doesn't win here? Everybody wins. Now, the insurance company's paying for this. Now, that should tell you enough right there. If the insurance and Medicare is going to pay for this test, tell me why. And give them a second to see what they say, because they're saving money. They'll pay $1,000 or $100, whatever they pay for this test, to save that $100,000 lawsuit from the wrong drug that killed them, that we should have known because this test was available and we didn't order it. That's your story right there. So you know what you got, and you got to know it well enough to be confident enough to project that. You don't just go, oh, well, it's called, I get paid every time you order that test, and you do good, and that's not going to work. You need to sit down and be confident, know what you have, look them dead in the eye, and say, protect you, protect your practice, protect your patient. Everybody wins. Everybody wins, and they get better patient care the first time without the trial and error that you've been so good at for 50 years or however many years you've been doing it. I don't think you're going to sit here and tell me that you've never prescribed a drug that didn't work for somebody, or God forbid, I hope you wasn't one of the patients died because of the medication. But the thing is, I mean, that could happen on the next one. You can stop it. You can order the test. Insurance paid for it. Patient lives. So there's no reason not to. That kind of highlights most of what I wanted to cover about this. The bottom line is there's so many people we can protect, the doctor, the patient, ourselves, make a good living doing it. I mean, there's good income off of this for everybody. So there's nobody that does not win here. No one. Every single person involved in this transaction from any aspect wins. They come out ahead over something, and that's why it's covered. So with that, any questions you have, reach out with your manager. Get a hold of me, whatever. We'll get you the help for the training, and we'll have more detailed stuff. This is like good basic, kickoff to get you going. But study your material, know your terminology, know what these reports do. Now, you don't have to memorize every one of those alleles and genes, but know what they mean when you see them. That way, if you're challenged, because the one thing and last thing I'll mention is when a physician, if he's on the fence and the ego, he's wanting to show that he is the victor, even though he knows you're right and he wants to do it, but he wants to look like it with his idea. Feed into that mentality, because he's going to look at you like, and you're going to look like a hero to your patients, because you're giving 22nd century medicine in the 21st century, personalized medicine. And there's a lot of folks out there so far that haven't caught on to the trend, and you want to be the ones to be the head of that curve to keep those patients and the increased income that you're going to get from it while you're protecting your home practice. So that's how it works. Anyway, reach out. Any questions, we'll get with you and we'll go from there. But until then, God bless, and we will see you at the top.